We'll begin today, this evening, for our second session of the Wisdom of the Elders at the Ecumenical Conference session with a opening prayer. Prayer is a very important part of our traditions, a very important part of why we came together again and how we learn from the efforts of our communities to really restore some sense of faith and belonging. I'm going to share a screen here for our first session, prayer and a smudge. So let us pray. Creator God, whose merciful presence watches over us, you who have guided us in these lands, given us strength and hope and sense of belonging to all things, to have helped us make relation through ceremony, through prayer, through guidance, and passing on traditions. We remember your wisdom, your words to our hearts that bring us guidance for the future generations. There are many who are suffering, many who need your vision. At this time we think about them, we remember that we also have a purpose to help. We also have a purpose to repair. We also have a purpose to make right things that were destroyed, were taken apart. And so at this time, we ask for that blessing for all those who are ailing, all those who are weak, all those who are in need, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, in all these ways that we help heal one another and that you help heal us through your creation. We give thanks. Jesus Christ, when Chapartesi. Chagawaka, Hogu, Horichin, Narizi, Nari, Chabichen, Nagahaz, Naguchithnea, Ichiat. Amen. And so as we offer our prayer, that is a reminder that it is the core of our understanding of our place in the earth, that we build upon that cultural and spiritual context that helps to strengthen us. We are bounded here by the covenant between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in the sight of the blessings of the Creator. This bond is called Treaty Number 7, signed by the Iarhe Nakoda, Nitsitapi, and Tsuut'ina. It also includes the people of Métis Region 3 and all newcomers and those who have come to share in relationship with this land. We know there is a deep history on these lands that includes pain, betrayal, and exclusion. It has led to deep scars for trying to change people into what we thought they should be and not respect the ways that God had blessed them. As we work toward redress and reconciliation, may we begin to live out those promises and good intentions over the blight of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and ableism that has marred our past and deepened the pain of Indigenous people with mental anguish, injustice, and suffering. We encourage all others to learn and speak their relationship to the lands and what they mean to your well-being and security. So much of this world is wrestling with abuse and oppression and war and destruction. Here in this land, we are committed to peace, a peace modeled by the relationship with the First Peoples, who sought to open their hearts and spaces to share in a future together, rather than an annihilation of one people for the benefit of another. Let us learn this lesson from the Indigenous people, that it might help to quell the fires of destruction and bombing and genocide that we see happening in places today. So at this time, as we enter into our second session, we begin the work of reminding ourselves, the grounding of where we are at and why we are here, why we have come to this point within our relationships of Indigenous people, non-Indigenous people, and the work of reconciliation, and also some of the challenges that we see, the challenges of recognition of missing and murdered women, the challenge of the plight of over-incarceration of our young people and of those that are with mental disabilities or mental issues, and also those that are affected by the paternal challenges of the foster care system, of the domestic violence in the home, and other issues that plague our families and our communities. And so this is part of what brings us to the work that had happened in the 1970s and the reasons for that. The first thing that they did when they came together as a community, having gone through the decades of residential school, of the assimilation process, when Indigenous people finally came together at the Ecumenical Conference to share and to listen to one another, the first thing they did was call for prayer, called for a day of prayer, which eventually became Indigenous Day. And so when we talk about how important this movement has been in revitalizing and in grounding Indigenous communities, it's part of the work of the people to reassert their identity through their spiritual connection. And so today we'll talk a bit about the Stoney cultural context, some of the scriptural context, the Ecumenical Conference, and talk a bit about Indigenous holy people from the session, and what we will be looking at in the subsequent sessions, the lessons and teachings that these elders have given us. I just want to start off with a saying here, and this is a Stoney saying, Woga sodiesa ichinoam. And in this saying from the Stoney people, we have proverbs, we have aphorisms that sort of reaffirm our identity. And so one of the teachings is this embrace sacredness and purity. And it's tied to who we are. It's tied to how we live in the world. When we take the term Yarhe Nakoda, we call ourselves Yarhe Nakoda. We are calling ourselves people without blemish. We're calling ourselves pure and obedient of God. So Yarhe underscores that term. And Nakoda just means the people. So in all Indigenous cultures, you have people referring to themselves by the term. And it's very much like the Hebrew would use the term Adam as a human being. Here we call ourselves the people, the human beings, those that are children of God, those that are related to God. And so there's a tie-in between the importance of how we see ourselves and how we connect that to that greater spiritual power of creation, of creator, and the world around us. And so we're part of that, and you'll hear that over and over in our sessions. Just wanted to take a moment to read from the First Nations version of the New Testament. This is an Indigenous translation from the US that talk about or takes the New Testament and looks at it through an Indigenous lens. And so the passage we have here, familiar for those that remember John 10:16, the scripture on the good shepherd. It is, I'll just read here. I am the good shepherd, the one who watches over the sheep. I will lay down my life for them. The ones who watch the sheep only pay will run away when the wolf comes, because the sheep are not theirs. Then the wolf preys upon the sheep and scatters the flock. The ones who do it only for pay and are not the true shepherds, for they do not care for the sheep, but only for themselves. I am the good shepherd, the one who lays down his life for the sheep. The Father who knows me, and I know him. In the same way, I also know each one of my sheep. They will know me. I have other sheep who are not from this flock. I will go and find them, and they will hear my voice, also hear my voice. Then there will be only one flock and one shepherd. And this is a quote that comes from my father's book, who lifts up this passage and remembers in his book, These Mountains Are a Sacred Place, the importance of that teaching as a way of entering into a community, that we are not so different from our Hebrew brothers and sisters. We are not so different from all others who have a faith tradition, but ours is a faith tradition that we lift up because that was what was given to us here in these lands. And I just want to read a portion here from my father's book, These Mountains Are Sacred Places, on the North American Indian Ecumenical Conference. And he writes, this is on page 233, one of the highlights of my life was hosting the North American Indian Ecumenical Conference. The event was held annually from 1971 to 1985 in the Stony Indian Park, a magnificent setting of hills, valleys, creeks, with a buffalo herd grazing nearby amongst poplar, spruce, pine, fir, and willow. The old Beaufort Creek flows by the sacred grounds, and in the background, the Rocky Mountains tower over the camp. The sacred rock monuments remind me that the Creator is timeless, while the refreshing mountain springs and the wildlife that inhabit his hills remind me that he is a generous and loving. Indigenous and non-Indigenous people came from all over North America for the 4 to 7 day long conference. Indigenous people from Central and South America, New Zealand and Hawaii, and Laplanders from the old country were all warmly welcomed. Many elders came to speak and to teach the traditions and spiritual ways of our people. In attendance were medicine people, ceremonial leaders, chiefs, counselors, clergy, youth, and children. I was chairman of the steering committee for the conference for several years. We had an open agenda, and everyone had an opportunity to speak about various issues, including language, traditions, history, beliefs, philosophy, and the importance of keeping the sacred fires burning. At the beginning of each conference, a sacred fire would be lit, and it would be kept burning through the entire conference. On occasion, the medicine man was there to help start the sacred fire, as they did in ancient times, by rubbing 2 sticks together. I have seen and admired these gifted people for their ability to start the sacred fire in a traditional style at the conference. Accompanying the lighting of the sacred fire, a pipe ceremony was always observed by our pipe holders and ceremonial leaders. Prayers were offered for Mother Earth, all of her children, the whole of creation. Prayers were also offered for the seasons, that they would continue to bring renewal and beauty to the land. One of the elders would explain the meaning of the sacred fire that was so central to our gathering, telling those present to revere the fire as one would an altar. Garbage was not to be thrown into the fire, but sweetgrass, sage, tobacco, and other offerings are to be placed on it, offered with prayers. The smoke of the sacred fire will carry prayers to the great mystery, our Creator. The fire would burn day and night throughout the conference, with young people responsible for keeping the fire going. And so, in this observance of our traditional ways of bringing together community, this fire was one element of the different traditions that were brought together from the South, from the Sioux people, from the plains, and from the Oklahoma and other areas. We had the different traditions that were honored in the circle for the purpose of bringing people together. And from the Navajo, I always remember that we had the medicine man, Tommy Nez, lighting the fire in the sacred way with the flints, and that he would be one of the proponents of the blessing way, the Navajo blessing way that was brought to our tradition at that juncture. I just want to read one section here from Around the Sacred Fire, and this is on page 296. This is a story that was told within the text that talks about a individual who was of Hindu background and who was looking for ways to connect to Christianity. And in his search, he was born in Bombay. He had traditions of a devout Brahmin family. He was a Methodist ordained minister, and that he had twice been stripped of ordained status to mainline churches in Canada because of his concern to incorporate my Hindu spiritual tradition into my Christian faith. And so this work of trying to find a space or way of maintaining a cultural integrity around a religious belief like Christianity became a very poignant reminder when he stepped into the ecumenical conference. He says, "Each visit was a blessing and an enrichment of my spiritual life. I would spend most of my time walking around, meeting people, talking to people. These were ordinary native folk with extraordinary insights into the dilemma of modern civilization and the possible ways of healing Mother Earth and her children. He was struck by the sensuality, earthy, incarnational quality to these experiences, so unlike the earth-negating pseudo-spirituality prevalent among the Bohemian white people disenchanted with materialism. Every native person he met seemed to understand that mystical insight was not the prerogative of the chosen few, but the birthright of every individual who was living in harmony with creation. It was a democratic mysticism." And so this willingness to understand and to exchange ideas and to find new ways of understanding our faith in an individual way, to bring that understanding to that next level of how we are practicing our spiritual tradition, how we are honoring what we have been given, and how we are finding new relation to the world around us. It's very important. I think we have John here, and he can also do a welcome. I'll just stop to share for a minute.
I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for attending. Peace be to all of you. As we contemplate and share these ideas, this vision of the Ecumenical Conference, some may ask, why are we doing this? And it is coming almost 50 years after the Ecumenical Conference has come and has happened. And one would say that we are only now ready to hear the message that was shared by the elders 50 years ago. We're only now ready to hear a land acknowledgement. We are now only ready to hear the Indigenous perspective. We are now only ready to hear the cries and the voices of the unmarked graves. So we're at a very pivotal time in society. We're at a pivotal time in the life of our churches, our ecumenical work. And so the question remains, what will we do? What will you be called to do? And so as we share these reflections, as we share these observations, I'm hoping that it will speak to you, that it'll speak to each one of us. What do we need to do as individuals? What do we need to do as congregations, as organizations, as we begin to lift up the issues of the unmarked graves, as we begin to lift up the work of reconciliation? So we are open, we are sharing, and we are hopeful. So I thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat as well. And bring greetings from your territory, your name, and your church. Thank you.
We have a lot of people from different organizations, so that's very good, very well received, and you were all welcome here. We're happy to share with everyone. And so I'm just going to play a video here that is on the Ecumenical Conference. This was done in 1977 with the CBC program called Man Alive.
A sacred fire, lit by a Navajo medicine man. Fire, the power of the Great Spirit, giver of life, a ray from the sun. For the past 7 years, Indians have gathered around this fire to reflect and to learn from their elders, to rekindle an interest in the warmth and comfort of their language, their religion, their culture. The cries of Native North Americans are growing louder today. They cry out for justice, for settlement of their land claims, for liberation from the treadmill of alcoholism, welfare, and despair. But these demands are not just the work of a few agitators. Rather, they are the manifestation of a deeper search for identity, for something called Indianness. It is a reawakening to values, to culture, and religion of the past. Underneath the demonstrations and sit-ins lies a realization by many Indians that while they may not be able or want to return to their old hunting and trapping life, they can revitalize the old Indian beliefs in creation, nature, and a deep spirituality. There is a desire that these ancient beliefs will help them in their quest to regain their lost dignity and identity. A sacred ceremony linking more than 1,500 Indians to their heritage. The sacred fire, common to Navajos, Ojibways, Crees, and Apaches, native people from all over North America. The fire started this gathering of people searching for Indian union. Seven years ago, this conference began with funding from Anglican and United Churches and organized by the Anishinaabe Institute. Today, on a budget of more than $35,000, largely from the Secretary of State, it is held in the Stoney Indian Reserve at Morley, Alberta. To the white visitor, it is at once a disturbing and exciting experience to be in a minority. Beads and braids, feathers and buckskin suddenly take on meaning. The teepees are again a place where Indians live. There were few whites. To be able to make this film, Man Alive prepared for well over a year. Our crew, some church people, and the curious found no red carpet, no open-arm greeting. The dominant society was native. There was pride and even defiance in this newfound Indianness. The young sought out the old and asked them to share their knowledge and the old skills. It was the elders who were important, for they held the key to the spirituality and culture the young people were so eagerly seeking.
You know, these elders are wise people, and they know that, you know, you must really want it and you must work for it. Like your spiritualism, it's not something that you can just sit down and learn in 1 week, but they are willing to, you know, help you start on the way. They'll help you with the sweat lodge. They'll show you how to fast correctly so you can find the answers for yourself, because, you know, it's all inside you. You just have to learn how to listen to the trees and the grasses and everything around you.
For the first time, more young people than old arrived at Morley. The feathers, the drum dances, the chanting are outward signs of a search for traditional ways by a people who have lost their identity. Edward Benton, an Ojibwe from Milwaukee, is one of the founders of AIM, the American Indian Movement. His spiritual ties run deep. He believes the native religion to be a great source of strength for the Indian.
I don't think that white people have ever fully understood the mysticism and the spiritualism of the Native American religion, simply because they could not grasp that a simple kind of people living in this Garden of Eden could have any kind of understanding of what God is. And they believed us too simple. They believed us too unsophisticated and heathen and without God and without religion. And so they viewed us as nothing more than perhaps simple animals. But what they didn't know was that we have a communication with the Creator, with all of creation. The truth will be known someday, and many people will be surprised to find that we too have a covenant with the Creator.
So that is the first video talking about the Ecumenical Conference and some of the opinions and the people coming together. A large influx of youth and a lot of what turned out to be a lot of leadership, transference of leadership and traditional ways of knowing to these groups that later became quite prominent leaders in our Indigenous communities across Canada and across North America. This is another video talking specifically about one of the elders who was seen in that video. His name was Ernest Tootoosis, and he was a holy person, a medicine person who took part in the conference and was very instrumental in teaching and offering teachings to other groups that came at that time.
Canada's 265,000 Indians are finding a new significance in their ancient religious heritage. Ancient tribal religions are becoming a powerful source of Indian solidarity. Ernest Tootoosis is a spiritual leader of the Cree, known and respected by other Indians throughout North America. He is a direct descendant of Poundmaker, carrying on the struggle of his people. Ernest strongly believes that in the customs, traditions, and beliefs of centuries ago lies the very future of his people. For as far back as we know, the Plains Cree have had a belief in a single god, Manitou, the Great Spirit, who has many servants or spirit powers, the air, the fire, the water, all the spirits of creation. When asked about his traditional beliefs, an Indian usually does not expound doctrine. He does not discuss theology in the abstract. The natural world around him, the animals, the birds, the plants, the rocks and stones, these are the elements that define his religion. Sitting next to Poundmaker's grave, Ernest started talking about God and creation.
Our story, the way the older people tell us that it's very close to something like Adam and Eve, but it just happens that the North American Indian never disobeyed in his garden. That's why in 1492 they found us living on this land and God was taking care of everything. We let him run the business, and we didn't have to work like the white man did, and he provided our food and the air on land and in water, and all we had to do was live in harmony with his creation and respect God above all. And this is holy land. This is land where man has never disobeyed God. That is to live against nature, to be building dams, to tear the land, and to try and conquer nature. We never did. And this is holy land. This water running down here, the Cut Knife Creek here, and then there's Battle River runs down there. And the old people tell us that these are the right hand instruments and servants of God. It's the sun, the wind, and the water, and the fire. These are holy things, spiritual things. We're supposed to live with those things. But today, because we did not live in harmony with nature, these rivers and waters are reacting to the foreign environment.
How do you go about treating water and fire and wood and that as holy things?
We talk to the rivers. My people used to travel, and if they come to a river, two people, the spiritual people, would get in there and stand by the river bank and talk to that water, thanking him for it, for doing its duty, and telling him, now I'm going to cross here. It's not that I'm tramping you down. No, I just want to cross. Take care of us. And then they'd go across. First they'd wet the top of their heads with water, and then they'd drink the water. And then they'd cross. And after they've crossed, they'd turn around and they'd thank the Creator in the water. And that was it.
Ernest believes in the religious nature of land. Lands and places have the highest possible meaning to him. The existence of holy places affirms his roots. The view from Sliding Hill, a sense of mystery all around. This ground is sacred. Nanabush, the messenger of the Great Spirit, appeared here. Ernest comes to this hill often to gather the healing plants and flowers and to pray with his elders. The old power, the old knowledge is passed on. Ernest Tootoosis, at 60, is still an apprentice, learning from the wisdom of the old teachers. For centuries, the same prayers have been said, the same rituals played out in communion with creation. The remains of Sundance lodges. The Sundance is the most sacred of the Plains Cree rituals.
Well, this is a holy ground. This is where more than one Sundance has taken place before I started my first Sundance. That's my first Sundance lodge over there, and this is the one we did last summer. My father had a Sundance on the same grounds here. Our Sundance is one of the highest religious ceremonies that the Plains Cree people have. It's something like it'd be a cathedral to a white man, I guess, going to a high mass or something like that. This lodge was given to us by the Spirit, to the first Indians that were created on this land. It's where we pray for ourselves, for our immediate family, our relatives, and all mankind, and all creation. We ask for a better life. That is a life that will produce, reproduce on, and to get our everyday needs. My father used to tell us, when I was a boy, about a time there was a Sundance like this, and it got hot, real hot weather, and the dancers were having trouble because it was too warm. An older guy came in and said, why don't you ask the Sundance maker to do something about this? Look at his dancers are suffering today. I guess maybe it's not for nothing that he made a Sundance. He must have something to back him up. So anyway, I guess they did give a pipe to the old man, and the old fella prayed, the Sundance maker. He prayed to the Creator. And he took 2 eagle feathers, and he danced to that post. First he faced east. That center pole you see there, he faced that one, but he stood on the west side. Next time he danced south. Next time he turned and he faced west. And the last time, faced north. And he took his whistle. They have a bone whistles on. And he had asked them to bring a water container. And as that center pole is standing there, he took his whistle and he stuck it right into that tree there. A stream of water came, filled that water kettle, pulled his whistle, no more water. shook his whistle like this. And all the dancers took part of that water. But first, they brought in an older man who blessed the water. He prayed. And all the people that came to that Sundance all had a taste of that water. These are the things that used to happen with my people when they were really doing it the way they were commanded to, you see. The buffalo is a child of God, same as me, you and I, only he looks different. He walks on 4 legs. Everything, so we're all children, you see. So he has a spirit the same way as I have because God created him. That's one thing I don't understand a white man, you know. He believes he's the only one that got a soul. Animal is an animal, you know. You can't pray to God if you think you're better than your brother. That's the Indian. You got to humble yourself. You got to be just as the smallest ant in the grass, they tell you. You got to think you're smaller than those. Then you can start thinking about talking to the Creator.
Is this a sacred site respected by all people, Ernest?
Most of the Indian people respect this. These lodges and this ground, this very ground we sit on. We see this as that it looks pretty bare, but when I was a young boy, everything that was used in there was left there by the old people. They just quit, took their drums, their rattles, their whistles, their personal belongings, and they just left. And everything was left there to rot back to the Mother Earth. But we used to have some good Christian people that believe in the white man's religion, you know. They come and take these things off our church. This is our church. I wonder what the white people would think about if I went to Montreal and went to a cathedral there and took some of the holy crosses off or a statue and brought it home, you know. I want to use that at home. Or go to the white man in Toronto or go to the graveyard there and start digging the white man's bones. I want to study what that white man had when he was alive, you know. I wonder what would happen to it. But what happens? They come down here and start digging our old people who are, to us, a departed body is a spiritual thing. He has lived his mother's life, and now he's living with the Creator. So the remains that he leaves here are holy to us. They're holy things.
What most of us relegate to the categories of animals, plants, and stones, implying an inferiority to man, the Indian refers to as peoples, as his brothers. Even stones are alive. Some are sacred and powerful. These parts of the universe are equal or even superior to man. In the order of creation, they were here long before man. And to the Indian, what is older is more honored.
This lake, the Indians call it the Manitou Lake because there must be great power around this lake. And a lot of young people used to come and seek for guidance, like into these cut banks. They'd stay there for days. They'd go there and they'd stay there for days fasting and just praying, seeking for guidance from the Great Spirit. This is handed down to me from my cousin, who has a stone that was handed down for generations. We don't know how many generations back on my father's side. It's still in a little buffalo bag. It's a very old little bag, and he opens it only once a year or so. We opened it last summer, and that little stone produces little stones once in a while. And this is a stone that was given to me there. And this was about the size of a jelly bean when I got it 2 years ago. And it's twice as big as it is now. And this is the second stone I got from my cousin. The first stone, my oldest boy is carrying it in Vancouver. It's a white little stone. It's putting you around. And when you take that little stone like this and you look at it, some people see faces. You see things in there that nobody else sees but you. These little stones are sacred to us. They're the messengers of our prayers to the Creator.
Ernest, what is Indian medicine?
Well, Indian medicine is it's the herbs that we get from the ground, from the barks and from the leaves of plants. Some we have to take some from flowers. Flowers as they bloom, you know, certain types of things. And these are the things that the older people know how to put certain groups together for certain diseases. I have two here with me. They were given to me. I don't know what they look like when they come out. They were given to me. This is for heart, for people that have high blood pressure or whatever, something wrong with the heart. They just keep chewing this, a little bit of this, once or twice a day. And that's usually brings them out of there. And this is another root that comes from the mountains. I got that from the Indians from the mountains, the Kootenays. When very hard to get in the prairies. My people use this too. They call it a root of life. As a man gets older, about 45, 50, then they start taking this. In the olden days, you either put it in your tobacco when you smoke it, or put some in your tea, or just make a little tea with it. Just grind it up. It makes you strong and healthy a long time. This one is very hard to get in this area. See, I'm very lucky to have this. These medicines will not work unless he gives us that power to do it. But we've got to be sincere and ask the Great Spirit, and then these things will happen. And the person that's getting treated too, he has to believe in God. There's nothing can be done without believing in the Great Spirit.
You believe it's important for your people to return to their ancient beliefs. Why is it important?
And I think it's very important because I think that's what an Indian is. That's what it was before the white man came here. Was a spiritual person, a person who believed in God and his creations and lived in harmony with those creations. And unless we take that back, then we're not Indians anymore. We have to restore that back to our young people. Our young people have to do that, to depend on that, and still use the white man's education, and develop our education at the same level as the white man. Let's play the same game with him, his own game, but let's have the spiritual power from the Creator. I myself say and believe that we was much better people before the white man came here, spiritually. Maybe we didn't have cars or anything, but we was rich, very rich people in spiritual life and living with the land at that time than we are today.
So those are the the lessons that I wanted to share, that there's an in-depth knowledge, and this is what we were preserving in the 1970s and working toward finding better ways to get along, especially on reserve, especially for those that came from reserve communities that had been Christianized, and that created conflict between those that followed the traditional teaching and those that were following Christian teaching. And the crux of the ecumenical conference was to help to repair those relationships and to help to demystify and to bring greater understanding and awareness about what the traditions were saying and how this could be beneficial. And so there was a lot of talk from Ernest Tootoosis and others that found scriptures in the Bible and found relation to indigenous thinking. So if we think about the lesson that was talked about the water that came out of the center pole of the Sundance, we think about those mystery experiences. And this past week, we had in our Transfiguration Sunday scriptures talking about the illumination of Christ and the surrounding of light and the speaking of God's words. And so these mystical traditions are something that indigenous people have a great familiarity with, and an understanding around how that fits into our way of understanding God and understanding our way of being in relation to God. John, if you want to add anything before we go into groups.
As I was saying in the introduction, it seems that we're only ready now to hear these messages. These were discussions that we had 50, 60 years ago. And I think many of us, myself included, were not ready to hear the teachings. Today, it's different. We have experienced the residential school survivors. We have experienced their stories. We are experiencing the unmarked graves. And we are coming to a realization that there is an Indigenous story, an Indigenous narrative, an Indigenous perspective. And that changes the landscape. It changes our view of the world. It also changes our view of one another and the church. And learning these things, how are we going to show up? How are we going to look at the unmarked graves? How are we going to live into reconciliation with the Indigenous survivors coming out of the residential school? So there are many things to contemplate as individuals, as groups, as organizations, as churches. So as we hear these things, what do we now think? And what are we going to share? What are we going to do? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just putting a question in the chat, and we'll go to groups. We've set up to do 10 groups, and there's about 6 people in every group. Just take turns in introducing yourself and in reflecting on this question of what did you learn from the elders' teachings, and how do they apply, or how does this change your understanding of the work of reconciliation and what we're trying to accomplish through reconciliation by lifting up and understanding, bringing back to understanding in some cases, the Indigenous teaching, and how important that is for not just the Indigenous people to learn themselves, but how that is informing things like climate change, things like the work of foster care children's and intergenerational trauma, and the effects that have happened to Indigenous people, the PTSD and the addictions and different things that have been ongoing. So there's a lot to sort of work through. And I think that the elder gave some good tools in thinking about that, and some good instruction that we pass on to our young people. So I'm going to just let everybody go back to groups. What did you learn from the elders' teaching? Well, thank you all for that time to reflect upon those words. Maybe we might want to go into some of the groups and see some of their feedback and what you thought of some of the lessons that were shared tonight. So maybe we'll start with room 1.
Can't remember which room I was in.
You were in room 1.
Room 1, yeah. Well, anyway, sorry, Tony, I was kind of late in logging in.
That's
and
fine.
stuff, and I caught the tail end of everything else. And I think in our group we talked about well, I mostly talked about the spiritual aspect of what I know, and from what I understand that the elder that was speaking was back in '78. And I just mentioned that since 1978 to now, that's quite a time frame. So, and I wasn't sure if we're still in that 1978 mode, or we're just now learning about it. You know, because some people back in 1978 said things that were going to happen. And some of those stuff never happened yet, but some have come to pass. maybe about the water, maybe about the land, the trees, you know, maybe about our spirituality, stuff like that. And Tony, I think you and I are about the same age, so
Mm.
and I really didn't like 1978. I really wasn't like I didn't really grow up culturally, but my family did teach me a few things about respect. And one of the things they taught me in our group, somebody talked about giving fresh moccasins to somebody that passed away. And it's not for decoration stuff. It's for the spirit, for the journey, to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave them an example. I gave my group an example that I said, well, I couldn't find it, but I do have it. I said, well, you know, I always tell my family, even if you don't smoke, even if you don't, always carry a lighter. You're going to need that someday. So with my group, I showed them my nail clippers. And I said I could use these nail clippers to cut my nails, but that's what it's used for, right? That's what it was invented and made for. But somehow or another, that nail clippers is going to help me somehow. I don't know how yet, but I kind of put it to words and explained to my group that you need something for your spirit. You always carry something for your spirit. And they talked about going across a river and asking for permission and all that respect. And I said that, and just to finish it off, we talked a lot. I mean, I talked a lot, but anyway, I said that when us, like the earth, you know, nature can do without humans. The animals and the earth, they don't need us. The earth can go on like without us. And when we are born, us as humans, when we're born, we're the most useless, helpless creatures on this earth. We need to be looked after. We need to be fed, you know, and years too, not just days or months. I mean, oh my God. But anyway, yeah, and we also talked about water and stuff like that. You know that water is a work of it's a miracle of nature. And fire. We talked about fire, and you know, when you can't go throwing food from your feast into the fire, because you know, when a person has passed on, we believe their spirit tries to retrieve that, and it can do them harm. So everything's mostly spiritual. Well, to me anyway, everything's mostly spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And said that fire, if you have fire, fire is a good thing, you know. It can keep you warm. It can cook for you. It could even defend you. You could use it to defend yourself. But also on the other side of the coin, that fire can destroy you. It can kill you. It can hurt you. It could hurt others. And same thing with water. We can't breathe underwater. Not yet, anyway. At least not without scuba gear. But so that's why we have to respect all these things that nature has given us. You know, nature has given us all those things to survive. And about 200, 300 years ago, we never worried about water being polluted, being safe to drink. You have to purify it, put it in a bottle so it's safe to drink. 300 years ago, I don't think anybody ever worried about dirty water. So anyway, basically, that's all I talked about in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Group 2, room 2, Diane Stewart, Elizabeth Kelly, Sandy, Teresa, and Trudy Wesley.
Well, I was voted to be the facilitator, so
Great.
I'll and please help me out here because my memory is not all that great, even short term. We talked a lot about, particularly because of our Western mindset, not recognizing the deep, number one, reverence for creation And we see the humility of the respect for all creation, including stones, and the fact that they all have souls and spirits, and that that we just need to listen to the message from them, which is intriguing. Somebody brought up that there is a Jewish tradition of leaving a stone when visiting those that have passed on. And another person talked about a memory of the Ecumenical Conference and meeting Chief Walking Buffalo and being fed Smarties from Chief Walking Buffalo, and how that impacted her as a child. Another person mentioned listening to music and the drums, and that it did bring up the heartbeat of Mother Earth. We learned about all the sacred land in this area, and places like, and I'm probably saying, but Minnewanka, which I've already forgotten what it means, but holy
Spirit Lake. Yeah.
Spirit Lake. And that we're all regarded as equal. And of course, that's difficult for many of us with this Western brain. And we've been socialized and taught that we are superior. And what is it going to take for us on this path to reconciliation? And somebody brought up how slowly this process seems to be. That when we're looking back at 78 and there was hope and optimism, and here we are and so little's been done. And recognizing that reconciliation is an act. I mean, it's reconciling. We're not going to arrive, that it's going to be a process, and that we need to step up our commitments to doing just such things, some dialogues such as this. Is there something else from my group that we could add to what I've said?
No, I think you covered a lot of it, Kelly. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was
So
a great job. Okay.
The thought of bringing back the Ecumenical Conference, that was
important.
That Glenda in particular really was hoping for that.
Yes.
Especially for our young people who we are a little lost, and that sounds like it might be a step in the process of reconciliation.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll touch on that a bit with the next group. That's room 3 with John and Gloria, Ellen, Arlene, Barbara. Go ahead.
Yeah, Gloria will lead.
We had a great discussion on some of the individuals had remarked on how Mohawk elders had attended the Ecumenical Conference. We also had the ideas of what and how we know God, by what name do we call God? And so knowing that there's an Indigenous name for God, we use and are familiar with the idea that God came among our people. God was always with us, and it's not a new concept. I think we also in turn we wanted to add for everybody in the group, Darlene, Monica, Ellen, Barbara, if you wanted to add a little reflection of what you heard and want to share.
Two things sort of I wrote down because they kind of jumped at me, and that was, what is my purpose in this life? And what actions are we called to do? Mm-hmm. And those are reflective that go on for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the next individual, we tagged off names. So
I was talking about the Sundance lodges and the wisdom that the elders shared about the hot sun and the water appearing, and people's thirst was quenched. But I also saw, and I used my imagination with picturing people having their thirst quenched. But the picture that we were showing was of the land, and I thought to myself, there are people who are part presently of the Sundance Lodge, but the picture that we were given was really the land of the ancient ones. And as I've been thinking about it, I just realized that there's a lot of wisdom in that land. And my phone is ringing. I'll just click off here.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the last group members, would you like to add?
Well, I'll just say that whenever it's come up, I think it's been clear to me through my time here with this group that, the view that Creator was common to Indigenous cultures, but it was accepted that how that was revealed was different from culture to culture, and that acceptance of that diversity, and then this willingness to kind of weave with Christianity is just, when I think of that, it feels very expansive inside my body. And it's hard to understand how Eurocentric culture has operated in the opposite way for as long as it has. And when this just feels so right, to look at the world that way, and to look at other groups and other people and other cultures that way. So just add that.
Thank you.
I think Monica captured something that Father Richard Rohr talks about, and that we have to get out of this black and white thinking, and it's more holistic. So as we experience the holistic, that's a healing for all of us. So thank you for that, Monica.
Thank you. We'll move on to group.
Anyone else would like to add the last? Oh,
we'll move on to group 4. Yeah, because we're moving through time here. Gail, Janet, Natalia, or Ron?
I don't think we're as organized as some of the other groups, but we didn't choose anybody to speak, so I'll start and the others can chime in. We spent a lot of time talking about how not living in proper relationships with the land has made where we live, and there was Calgary and there was Saskatchewan and Columbia, and myself in British Columbia, how that has affected and how that has changed the land in not good ways, and ignored the voices that we really do need to hear. And I was wondering if there's a way that those voices can be heard in where the power is, where the seat of power is, wherever that is. I think there needs to be Indigenous voices with equal weight, a chance for them to bring their perspective, because we can see the effects even in farming, where I thought farmers would be close to the land, and our Saskatchewan farmers said not true. They're being controlled by multinationals, and all sorts of things are going on that just don't make any sense at all. And if we were really listening to the people that knew the land better, that wouldn't happen. I'll invite the other two to chime in if they'd like to.
What we came out with was that we've lost touch with creation and with Creator. We've taken creation and nature and we replaced them with science and technology. And we've lost so much. Like all four of us at one point came up with, we didn't like living in an area where everything's been concreted over. And how much we would love being able to get back out into nature. There was the thing about the traditional, the culture and the tradition and everything being passed on And we don't do that in the white society. We kind of formulate everything. And we did make one comment in there that people that listen to the big corporations think that the people who are trying to go back to a more natural way of farming, back to the land, have been brainwashed, and it's the exact opposite. The people that are trying to go back to the ground, the ones who respect the land, who respect all the animals, they're the ones that know what they're doing. The ones that are doing the monoculture and listening to consumerism are the ones who've been brainwashed. And there was a point when the line about this was the Garden of Eden, but you never turned away from God, and God just kept providing, and it's never been your land. It's always been God's land. And if we could think that way and respect that, how much better off we would be.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we have Gail or Natalia.
I can just add that I'm seeing here in this group really amazing people and great thoughts. I just think that we should, or somehow put the line down to the youth, and me working as in the first third ministry in the Pacific Mountain Regional Council. I think there is a big gap with the youth, and somehow we should bring all these thoughts and all these conversations to the youth, so we can make some changes, and it doesn't stay just in thoughts.
Thank you. Gail, did you have anything to add?
I think she had to go.
Okay. The next group, room 5, which was Anne Carson, Bonnie, Rose, Shauna, Kennedy, and Val Ross.
Yeah, so we talked about a lot of different things, and we started by talking about all creatures are relatives, and just how how just that different worldview is so enlightening, and that elders were seen with more respect, and even like a stone being older is enough to garner more respect. Yeah, that was really interesting, and then we kind of moved into, trying to take a prayer through your entire day, so living your whole day in a spiritual state, which we kind of see as something that's more in line with Indigenous spiritual practice, so that it's not just, in the morning you do a prayer and then you get on with your day, that it's part of your daily, weekly state of being, to just always be in touch with that holiness. And so we found that really inspiring. And then we kind of went through a conversation of just sort of this overall yearning to have connection with Indigenous people, and just having these open conversations, and how refreshing it is, and how much we get from them. So that was that's sort of where we ended. If anyone else from our group has anything to say. Bonnie and Sam had a lot to say about the Remembering the Children project and their work up north, and that was really fascinating too. I guess they don't want to say anything. That's okay. But it was really, we touched on a lot of topics. It was great. It was a good conversation.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to group 6. That's Alyssa, Denise, Diane, Hugh and Valerie, Marie, and Mary Lou Alexander.
I was a bit in and out of the conversation, so I don't know if I'm the best person. I don't know, Valerie, if you want to share some thoughts, or I can share a bit and then you can add in. I heard a lot of really great thoughts. I think there was a lot of talk about that understanding of our connection to land and environment and how important that is, and the need to really, like, how much, I think there's like a theme of how much wisdom and knowledge Indigenous culture and understanding has, and how like that learning, how much we need to learn, and that we touched on environment, we touched on like on health, and like the understanding of mind, body, spirit all being connected, and that learning, and just in different ways of being, and how, yeah, there's so much learning to do, how that learning is not like, oh, I just like you show up, once. I think that was one of the things that was shared, and you learn it, but it's like a lifetime, and you have to demonstrate your, like, the importance of sort of being in it for the long learning and the deep learning. And yeah, I don't know. I was, like I said, I was in and out a little bit. If there's other things, I think there's other stuff that I'm missing. If anyone wants to jump in.
Sure, if anyone else wants to add, it'd be great. Going once.
Valerie, you're muted. I think Valerie's speaking.
Oh, good.
Might
Okay.
be muted.
I shared a bit that I don't always share, but that I walk both paths. I'm a traditional sun dancer. I have been, and of course that means you continue anyway. And I learned, I've been learning a lot. Here, I live in the Rondes as well. The traditional territory of the Sagawee Nehiyaw, which is woodland Cree territory, and I have the opportunity to learn a lot here from a traditional community that I'm part of, family that I'm part of, and people who know the land and who understand it, and who, I was just sharing, for example, that I go on a boat trip. I never worry about wearing a life jacket or something, because I know the people, they know the land, they know the waterway, they understand it. And I trust that. And it's always, so I'm very fortunate here, but we're also fighting and for our northern Saskatchewan muskeg, which is under threat of a mining proposal, of the raping of our forests here by, the clear cutting that's happening up here. It just breaks your heart. And we have our children, we have a high rate of youth suicide, of youth addictions, of addictions. And we have those as well as, so we have the whole thing, I guess, of, the results of colonialism are very close here. We know them, we see them every day. I have sometimes been at wakes 3 times a week, and a lot of times as young people, so we know both. We know both sometimes here. So that's,
I don't think a lot of people understand that there are, it seems like it's an ongoing, especially with wakes and funerals, it seems to be almost a daily thing on many reserves, and that's the way it is in Morley as well. So thank you for bringing that up and for your honesty around those issues. I'm going to go to group 7. That's Brenda Tim, Nancy Walker, Pat Seal, Catherine, and Sheila Cook.
I think someone else should speak from our group. I think I spoke a lot, so yeah, too much. Tony knows. Does someone want to summarize what they thought they liked learning tonight?
I was hoping that you would speak, Sheila, but we certainly, or at least in my mind, we're concentrating on creation being God's creation, and how the story that stuck with me, Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden, but the Indigenous people have seen it as holy and never being thrown out. And as a white person, that really has touched me, because I at one time thought of God and Creator as being different, and now I see the blending of it. And yeah, as I said in the group, I come from a very, very liberal congregation, and we've stopped using the word God. And when I've been acquainted more and more with Indigenous teachings, Creator has really been an important concept. Our church tried to sort of say love instead of God, but creation and Creator and the holiness of all of life. And somebody said that, that we all, we talked about the trickster a bit, and yeah, anyway, I'll stop, but it was a wonderful conversation.
Very glad to hear that. Did anyone else from the group want to add anything? If not, we'll move on to group 8. That's Elaine Mansfield, Marilyn Cheney, and Michelle.
We didn't have organize ourselves to have a speaker. It was a great conversation. The reconciliation aspect was discussed quite a bit. I'll let others speak too. And the realization was expressed more than once that we need to look at systemic aspects of racism and of diminishing others, and as well as personal. What do we do in conversations? We discussed that as well. Peter and Lydia, I wonder if you want to say something, or Michelle or Marilyn. Peter and Lydia have a very interesting story if they're willing to share it. Peter Newberry?
I think they've both left for the evening.
Michelle, you're muted. Are you going to say anything?
No, I think you captured our group well. Thank you.
Okay. What about Marilyn? You're muted, Marilyn.
I think you said most of what is important. I do think, and I guess Lydia isn't going to speak, but she was talking about how she has learned to, when she was a teacher, change the curriculum. She read over the proposed curriculum, decided it was insulting and demeaning, and refused to teach it. And it's gone on as part of her life work, as I understand it, to making the Indigenous people a part of history and a meaningful part. And that was very inspiring.
I was appointed by the group to be the speaker, so I'll try to capture, but again, anyone that wants to join in and correct or add, you're welcome. We covered a lot of ground, some of which has already been covered. someone, I can't remember now who and which group, was talking about different perspectives and seeing things from different perspectives. And we talked about that and how refreshing it was to hear the biblical stories from a different perspective, and how important that is for us in furthering our understanding of our story. We talked as well about, as someone did earlier, about the importance of when we are engaged with nature, when we're crossing a river or a brook, of being mindful of that and respectful, and engaging in that exchange with another spirit. We talked about what Ernest Tootoosis was talking about how they would leave the ritual items or musical items from the Sundance at the lodge to return to the earth, and how sad it was that white people would come and remove those articles. We talked to, what else? I'm trying to think here. Oh, we talked about the coal in the mountains and how one of our members of the group was a geologist, and talking about how coal was fossils and living beings that are still living in many ways. And how if you look at a mountain as a living being, a being with spirit, it becomes very difficult to gut that mountain and take its innards out, the coal out. And then Tony gifted us with the story, which speaks to what some other people have been talking about the need for young people to be more connected with the elders and the sharing and closing that gap, which I think is across different nations and peoples, that the young people have become disconnected from their elders. And he told a wonderful story of when, due to COVID, the elders in a nation, there was no food, like there's shelves in the Walmarts were bare. And so the young people followed traditional teachings and protocols and prayed, had a pipe ceremony, went on a hunt and did very well, and butchered the animals and then gave those to the elders, so they had something to eat. So that was a sign of hope for Tony and for us, that it is possible to bridge that gap. If anyone else wants to add, that was a quick summary as best I remember.
I'm going to turn to Gloria, and Gloria can offer her comments for tonight.
I just wanted to share that I think it's important that the language and the culture and the ceremony that the elders shared still resonates today. There hasn't been much in the way of a changing of the interpretation. It's always been a sacredness. We've always known God. We've always been connected to the land, and I think it's the incumbent upon non-Indigenous people to realize that we've always held this view. And as the elders was schooling us, we respect the land, we respect our ancestors, we respect those bones, we respect that burial site, that ceremony site. We don't take from there, and we don't use it in a way that's, we're not a specimen to be looked at. And I think that's very appropriate to, again, when we talk about land acknowledgement and our place in the world as human beings, how we treat one another, how we have an understanding of people and place and sacredness. And I've been really fortunate to hear stories from the Ecumenical Conference and how we carry those stories from our ancestors that came, or our elder that came, that I was really nice. It was really nice to hear that, to hear the reminisce and how people came to Morley, came to our Ecumenical Conference, and how they understood the ceremonies and the sacredness of the land. That history still resonates today as fresh as it was, 50 to how many years ago. And as we carry forth, we're carrying that knowledge. Our next generations, the 7 generations behind and the second 7 generations to come are carrying that knowledge. So I think it's a very important reminder. What will we carry forward? What will we help in the way of the teachings that we're bringing forward? What have we learned? And what are we willing to share? Now that we know the histories of Indigenous peoples and our traditional ways, our spirituality, what will we do to enhance and support that for our next generations? Because I think that's the goal as matriarchs, as women, as spiritual people, Two-Spirit, as our leaders, as our men, our warriors, our medicine people. These are the questions, the hard questions. So many years later, we have to move forward, and we have to move forward in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. And yes, further questions, and we'll be looking at some of those aspects of the relationships as we move forward in the next few sessions. Just want to turn it over to Sheila Cook, who is our sister in BC, who is part of the VST ministry program, working on her MDiv there, and comes to us from the Anglican and United Churches, and a great friend to our family and to our community. So I'll ask her to give us her final thoughts and a closing prayer.
Final thoughts. What glorious time together in conversation, where Christ is in the center, where we put our worries, where we put our concerns at his feet. We do this together. It's so important that we do not carry shame that is not ours, that we live in hope, and that we are here for the other. Christ teaches us that. Our traditional Indigenous ministry taught that from the moment you were born, you and the elders were the closest to God, and you were raised up fiercely individual, and by the time you knew what was what, you knew your individuality came from community. And our youth need to remember that. They have not forgotten. Our elders have said, it's not that we've forgotten or that they are gone. It's that these things must be remembered in our time. So let us pray. Creator, we give you thanks for all you are and all you bring to us, for our visit within your creation. In Jesus, you place the gospel in the center of the sacred circle through which all creation is related. You show us the way to live a generous and compassionate life. Give us your strength to live together with respect and commitment as we grow in your spirit, for you are God, now and forever. Amen. Kinanaskumatin, thank you.
Vishnesh, thank you so much. So thank you everyone for coming, for taking part. We will endeavor to get the session up as soon as possible, and we will meet again next week at the same time and reflect upon some of the additional challenges that have been put forward. And at this time, just hoping that everyone has a safe time, that they are well in their family life and other things, and that we think about this Lenten time as a time of nurturing and a time of hope that we can carry forward from week to week, and we will meet again. So thank you all, and good night.